So I wanted to do a little example of the vibrational frequency of ego's path versus soul's path and how you can actually have a felt sense of it. So if we're looking through the Barbara Brennan model, we might be saying, am I moving from my lower three bodies, the physical, emotional, and mental bodies, or am I moving from that fifth body, that divine will, that divine intent? I personally call it the yellow brick road because it actually seems to register in the body that way and sort of unfold like a gridding. If we look through the lens of Kabbalah, maybe we'd be saying, are you looking through your physical and sensate, or are you looking beyond your creative and through your spiritual lens? There's a felt sense of these systems in the field. I want to give you an example. So we know that our wiring is pretty much synonymous with karma, and it is inlaid with our family lineage, our cultural conditioning, if you believe in it, what we've learned and what we've done and what we haven't in other incarnations. And all of this is embodied in the persona. And then we can use things like astrology or the Enneagram to sort of get the architecture of persona. And that's still, for me, residing in these first few lower levels. Not lower as in less than, but lower as in the spaces on ground. The aspects of us here are closer to manifest reality and earth plane. And they're all very real, but they're certainly not more real than the other spaces. So how can I embody all of my levels of self? And of course, that's not for everyone. But if it is for you, you'll know it's for you because you're called to discern. There's a deep call in your body that you kind of can't avoid at some point. So here's my example of really getting your fingers underneath the difference, getting your eyes around the difference between moving from ego's will or moving from soul's will. And for me, soul's will is actually a direct plug-in to what we might call divine will or divine plan. And for me personally, I've had a felt sense of what that is. So I do believe it to be a thing, though using too many words to describe it sort of loses all of it in the mystery, or it loses the mystery itself. So here's the example. So if we look through Enneagram, I'm a 4 temperament. I'm a Leo rising, Scorpio south node, Virgo moon. What else feels important? Cancer sun, 12th house. So ego sees the cute guy in the wine store and starts to have really subtle, really innocent fantasies about chatting with him. And the body fills with warmth and curiosity, and the personality structure starts to form around posturing in a way that might be a vibrational match to what I'm sensing in his field. Only, I'm not actually sensing accurately at this point. I've found that when we're sensing through ego, it's not an accurate sense. We are imbued with all of the karma and lineage and patterning and adaptations and attachment styles that I kind of pointed at earlier. So that's the lens, like the lens that ego wants through is imbued with all of those things. It's like a very wooded forest covered in vines. We got to clear the vines to see the actual path. So the vines are all the conditioning. But nevertheless, like ego identifies with the vines and wants through them without doing much discrimination or discernment about why it wants what it wants. So my whole being could be flooded with this. I could be sitting here at a wine bar and my whole being could be flooded with these ideas about connecting with this person, but I have no foot in reality anymore. I'm just sort of creating my own reality on top of reality, and in a subtle energy way. This is what we might call an objectification of another human. So I'm taking my unprocessed, instinctive, adaptive fantasy world, which is always created to try to fulfill some early sequence that didn't happen, which essentially we might call wounding. So as I sit and I'm having this whole fantasy, my body gets flooded with hormones and chemicals, and I start to have an even better time, even though nothing has happened in reality. I'm having a better time sipping on my wine than I would have if I would not be or sub or consciously entertaining these thoughts of maybe having a conversation with this human. So then let's say I go home and I get some space from that and I say, wow, I wonder why. Like, what is it specifically that I was drawn to about this person? And if I'm really earnest about the frequency, there's a guardedness there. There's a guardedness that sort of reverberates out a mimicking of sovereignty. But it's actually an unexcavated sort of surrogate for true sovereignty and true faith in the self and true embodiment of something higher into this now realm. It's actually more or less an unexcavated piece, which really would appeal to the aspects of my personality that also have gone unexcavated. And I think deep down, maybe we could do this together. Maybe we could heal together. Maybe I could heal him. Maybe he could heal me. So this is just some of the inner rhetoric that pops forth as natural adaptations from all of the early on conditioning. And let's say that I further discern and I'm seeing and discerning that, oh, I think I just created like a whole fantasy land right there, and it wasn't even a real thing. So that generally pops me out of the fantasy when I can sit back and discern and go through why I'm motivated towards these types of attractions, and it pops me back into soul. And when I'm in my soul, it's a felt sense, it's not a concept. And then soul has sort of a different perspective. It's not seeing through the vines in the forest, it's just the forest, and there's a very clear sunlit path. And on this sunlit path, my attractions aren't really attractions. There's a movement from resonance down and through me that's not about quick ego sensate pleasures or resolving some kind of early wounding. There's just this movement of this sunlit path. And if I overlay that sunlit path into that wine bar for a minute, what I would see is that there's actually no earnest movement towards this being. There's no earnest movement towards this being. There's a focus on the being in front of me that I went to the wine bar with. There's a focus on my own energy field and my own body, and all of that is filled with the love that I am and the love that life is, and really nothing more. There's no outside movement. There's no reach from outside of my inner field towards this being any longer. So it is quite curious to me that we can have very different ego agendas, desires, motivations than we do on a soul level. But what happens if we don't have a felt sense of our soul? That just hasn't come for us yet. It just hasn't naturally happened. There are gateways in, and by my understanding, a common study, a common practice we can do to develop that felt sense is to meditate, create space in your field. And I don't mean listen to a meditation as in a contemplation that keeps your mind busy. I mean, the Buddhist way of breathing in and then breathing out and going out with the breath, and then breathing in. If I'm thinking, I say thinking, and I come back. And, creating space like this calms the nervous system, calms the energy field, and clears clears all the thorns and the vines from the woods, if you will, and gets me really clear on the woods and the sun. And then I sit in the center of that path in the sun, and things are calm and steady. And then I can directly feel what my next movements are for the day or what have you. Now, some people think that the more spiritual we get, the more lazy or tapped out that we get from human reality, but I've not really experienced that to fully be true. Soul wants to be here. Soul is having a human incarnation for purpose. It has its own movements. And when I sit with soul, it definitely moves me to do my bills or to do a newsletter or to outreach to particular clients or to get a sign made for my business, whatever it is, if I'm aligned with soul's reason for being here, the to-do list is going to unfurl. But the cool thing I found is that the to-do list is padded by all of this spaciousness. It's not an adrenaline approval driven thing, which again, that's another way we can do reality. That's an ego way we can do reality, is living for accumulation and approval and the dopamine hits of completing a task. And when we take the time to meditate, when we take the time to earnestly seek soul, when we get genuinely curious about if it is true that soul might have a subtly different movement through life, different agendas and purposes than the automatic reaching of ego. When we contemplate that with curiosity, I do feel it is eventually shown to us. When you come to the multiverse with a question that's pure of heart, you will be shown the way. So the takeaway here might be, how do I know if I'm moving from ego versus moving from soul? And I found that the body registers the two spaces very differently. So when I'm moving from my ego, it's almost like thoughts generate emotions, generate physiological sensations that are very pleasing to me, or not, or the other way in the case of aversion. And in the case of soul, I feel very steady. I feel my bones. I feel my deep connection with the core of the earth. I feel my interconnectedness with all of life as like a backdrop of like a huge penetrating sheet that I am a part of. You might have very different felt sense. That's just the way my body-mind experiences it. But I do think that with curiosity and a sense of playfulness and detachment, you can sense for your own self the physiology, the felt sense in your soma or your energy field of what does it feel like for me when I am moving from or interfacing with my life from a space of ego versus from this place of soul or divine will, or again, what I call yellow brick road. So I hope that this has been a little bit helpful for you in starting to distinguish the different potential movements. There's not a bad or wrong, but I think once you start to know, you kind of can't go back to not knowing. We come into deeper responsibility to align with our soul's will, which for me is also in alignment with divine will. And as we do that, we're fulfilling purposes that have less to do with the word purposes and more to do with just this giant completion that's never completed. And it feels very sane, and it feels very grounded, and it does update the nervous system, in my opinion, to a healthier shape. And yeah, so I'm curious to hear what's real for you. Have you had the privilege of differentiating your soul's movement and attractions from the divine will of your soul? Thank you.